Good morning. I'm Jill Weiss, the Chair of the Water Allocation Committee, and I'm calling at this morning's meeting. We're going to begin. First, I need to ask all the commissioners, remind them that they have a duty to avoid any conflict of interest. And so I'm asking you now, do you have a conflict with any of the action items coming before the board? And pardon me, you really just have information items. Okay. Seeing none, we will move to the approval of minutes. This time we had both November and January, and I think we can do them in one motion unless someone has some questions. Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
That was Commissioner Duggan seconded and Tweedy made the motion. Okay, well, moving right along. It's listed on your, oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Attorney General. We do need a vote on that. So all in favor? Aye. Okay, any opposed? No. All right. So now we're going to move to the information items, and thank you, Director Rogers. It is listed on the agenda as an action item, but I've confirmed with staff that this is actually an information item, and it's going to be the Catawba Water Management Group, their history and ongoing bi-state planning. And I believe Jeff Lineberger is going to do the presentation.
Just enhance with the, okay. All right, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here today. I'm Jeff Lineberger. I'm the General Manager of Water Strategy, Hydro Licensing, and Lake Services for Duke Energy. But I'm here today to talk to you about the Catawba Water Management Group, of which I'm the Vice Chair. This organization has been in place for about 18 years now. And I personally think we've accomplished a lot of things and are really on a path, a continued path of collaboration to figure out how to solve hard water resource issues in the Catawba Watery Basin. We've had some success at that, and hopefully that success will continue. I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the Catawba Watery River Basin itself, and then some about the Water Management Group's history and where we're headed. Some of these collaborative initiatives that we've worked on, I'll talk about some of those a little bit. And then, you know, a big part of our job is to educate the public about their water supply. And that's a difficult thing. There's some complexities about the Catawba Watery Basin that make it harder for people to understand how it operates. So we spend a fair amount of our time trying to help those interested folks, especially ones that can be thought leaders and be voices of reason and can actually understand the science and engineering a little bit behind how this river basin works. All right, the Water Management Group. A lot of words here, but we have a mission, and our mission is basically to work together to identify, fund, and manage projects that will extend the capability of the shared water supply to meet human needs while protecting the ecological integrity of the waterway. And that's kind of easy to say that. It's a harder thing to do. We do have a vision. Vision is for this water supply to last much into the next century. And when I say last, I'm really talking about support growth in the river basin, much into the next century. So it needs to be sustainable. We're doing that through research. We're doing that through working together, making changes where changes are needed, and especially paying a lot of attention to our water shortage response. We've got kind of a unique situation here with something called a low inflow protocol that I'll talk about in a little bit. But this really is a river basin that when drought comes, the river basin acts as one. It's not individuals making it up as they go. We have a coordinated plan that we operate on, and it absolutely has saved water intakes in the past from being uncovered when we have droughts. Okay, the river basin. Catawba Wateree River Basin goes from the foothills above Old Ford and below Grandfather Mountain all the way down to the confluence of the Wateree River and the Congaree River in South Carolina in the coastal plain. So it's about 376 miles long. It's fairly long, but it's really not a very big river basin. The Catawba portion in North Carolina is the 6th largest of the 17 major river basins in North Carolina. And the Catawba Wateree portion in South Carolina is the smallest of the 8 major river basins in South Carolina. But it's very heavily populated, particularly the North Carolina part. This river basin is where the company I work for started. It's the cradle of Duke Energy. The Wiley Hydro Station was originally built in 1904, and that was the first hydropower station on the river. It was much smaller. It was called Catawba Hydro then. It was only about 7 megawatts, had one electric customer, the Victoria Cotton Mill, which was next door. So when the cotton mill didn't work around the clock then, so they worked 8-hour days. So when right before the mill workers got there, we put the generating units on. When they left, we turned them off. The water ran over the dam. And that was the first of the founders of our company's vision. This was the first river basin in the whole United States that was comprehensively planned and developed for electricity production. So all 11 of the eventual reservoirs that got built here were all envisioned around 1900. All of those were. The purpose was to provide a change in the economy, to go from an agricultural-based economy to a manufacturing-based economy, particularly with textiles being the target. And this area was known at some points during the 1900s as the textile capital of the world. They had a vision to have a textile mill every mile. Didn't quite get there, but as the mills started developing and people started seeing the benefit of electricity, obviously everybody wanted electricity in their life all the time. So the vision changed a little bit, but the hydro stations and the reservoirs that are there really are a gift from that generation to ours. And we have always looked at that as Duke Energy as our legacy, and we're going to protect our legacy. So, and thankfully, through a relicensing process, we've gotten lots of partners to help us protect that shared water supply. There are 12 lakes here, or 11 lakes here. There are 12 hydropower stations. One lake actually has 2. But all of those 10 of those were built before 1928. The last one, Lake Norman, was completed in 1964. There are about, in total, if you count our hydropower stations and our nuclear and fossil stations, there's enough electricity produced here to provide about 4 million average homes a year with their electricity. And that's the generating capacity wise, it's about 1/4 of our company's generating capacity in the Carolinas. There are 2 million people get their drinking water from this lake and river system. And there are about 16 million recreation visits a year to the lakes and the river stretches in between. So it's not an overstatement, I don't think, to say that maybe gallon for gallon, not size wise, because it's not that big a river, but gallon for gallon, this might be one of the hardest working rivers in the United States. Okay, it's all rainfall driven. Without the rain, we don't have anything. The average rainfall in the river basin is about 46 inches a year. The mountain portions get a little more than that. The lower portions down to towards the coastal plain get less. This cartoon depicts the usable storage of the 11 lakes combined. And that number, 255 billion gallons of usable storage, that is the total in all 11 lakes. And that's a big number, but relative to the amount of rainfall, if you look at that storage as counting your savings account and the rainfall is your income, we're saving about 7% of our income because it, relative to how much rain falls on that river basin, it's really not a whole lot of it in storage. There's about 200 million gallons that is lost from the 11 lake system for human uses, and you see those detailed out there. There's another 200 million gallons or so on average that evaporates from those 80,000 acres, surface acres of lake out there. And that 200 million gallons is an annual average number. On a hot summer day, it's over 300 million gallons. So there's a lot of the water that's lost that nobody can really manage. But that's just part of the environment that we have with the lake system. But that usable storage is what all those humans are relying on. That's the change in timing of when the water is available between rainfall and reality. Talk about our members a little bit. We have a lot. Duke Energy and about 19 water utilities have water intakes on the main stem, either in one of the reservoirs or in the river stretch downstream that depends on the storage in the reservoirs. In 2020, we changed our bylaws a little bit to allow other water utilities who don't have their own water intake to be able to be members of the organization. So we've got 19 main stem members plus Duke Energy, so there's 20 there. We have 2 utility members, TEK and Concord, and we have a third one that is in the works, and that's York County, South Carolina. We don't have any associate members yet. But what you might notice from the map is it's basically the whole map's covered. I mean, we got members all over this river basin. And it's really been an interesting thing to see some of these folks get to know each other and to start to understand each other, understand each other's interests. And it's really special when they start looking out for each other. And that is a lot of what has happened here. All right, there's our board. The Jimmy Bagley, Deputy City Manager of City of Rock Hill, is our chair. He's been our chair for about 5 or 6 years now. Barry Gullett with Charlotte Water was our original chair, and he was chair for the first 10 or 11 years until he retired. Jimmy and I have both been involved on the board since the organization was formed. All of these folks here are very active. Our board meets every other month, and those meetings are usually about 3 hours long, sometimes longer than that. We have a lot of business to take care of. And then the total organization's representatives meet in between months. So every single month, the water management group's having a meeting. We also have an advisory committee. If you notice that everybody on the board is water utility or Duke Energy. Our advisory committee gets at a lot of those other interests that are out there. And you all can see what those categories are. I don't think any of these would surprise you. I would point out that our chair of the advisory committee, Vicki Taylor, Tim Guestwicki, representing the recreation interest, and Shirley Green, representing property owners. All 3 of those folks have really been involved with the water management group's formation since back in the hydro licensing process, which I'll talk about a little bit. They've been around a long, long time. This is a very active committee. They help us make sure we don't have blind spots, basically, that we are addressing all the issues that we need to be talking about when you're trying to manage a heavily used water supply in a sustainable way. All right, our history. Really, the water management group got its founding in our hydro relicensing process. Those 11 reservoirs that I told you about, all of those are they're operated under a license by Duke Energy. that comes from the federal government, from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. 10 of those lakes were built before there was a licensing requirement. The big one, Lake Norman, when it was proposed, there was a licensing requirement for private hydro development on a public waterway. So we had to get a license to build Lake Norman. And because it would be hydraulically connected to those others that already existed, we also had to get a license for them. The company decided to put all those into one license application, got that license in 1958, and it was for 50 years. That original license, when you think about it, predated all really of the environmental type regulations that we had. So there wasn't a whole lot in that thing in terms of specifics about how lakes would be managed, access, water quality, those kinds of things. But that license was set to expire in 2008. The relicensing process is a minimum 5.5 years long. So, you know, Duke Energy and the region had grown up together, and we had lots of next door neighbors. We had lots of people using these lakes in different ways. We could have followed the regulatory process that basically would have had us have 1 or 2 public meetings, go away, submit a license application to the FERC, and then all the fireworks would start. And we knew that that probably wouldn't be successful. So I'm happy to say that we did the voluntary enhancement. Instead of doing it that way from the get-go, we set up a conversation with the river basin. We developed 6 stakeholder teams that have broad interest base, and we set out with them for the intention of getting to a binding relicensing agreement that we could then write our license application around. So that when we sent our application to the FERC, we would have basically the region's proposal for how Duke should operate the system. It all sounded really good. It was not an easy thing to do, but through a lot of dedication by a lot of people, after 3 years, we got to a relicensing agreement that 70 parties signed. And of those, we had 29 local governments involved. 27 of those signed the relicensing agreement. So that I really felt like that was a tremendous accomplishment by a lot of folks. But as part of that, it identified the need to have a water management group to take care of the long-term interest in water quantity. That same agreement also provided for that low inflow protocol I mentioned earlier. It's managed by a little different group. It's called the Drought Management Advisory Group that meets once a year or once or twice a month if we're actually in a drought. But so I talked about the 03 to 06 relicensing period. We filed that license application with FERC in the summer of 2006 and immediately went into using the low inflow protocol and also working with those water suppliers on the formation of the water management group. We hadn't really contemplated that it would be a 501c3 before, but after we got all those folks together and started working on the bylaws, we decided that that would probably be the most effective way to do it. Because if we were a 501c3, some of these projects we could actually get cost sharing money for. So we're very happy with the way that has worked out over time. You see that middle box there, that creation of the water management group, resolve the conflict with Duke Energy. You know, in the hydro world, water is your fuel supply. So it is very common for hydro project operators, if you have others that are withdrawing water from the reservoir and not sending it back to the reservoir, well, they're taking away some of the fuel. So they're reducing your generation output and can have a capacity impact as well. So we proposed during that 3-year negotiation period that we would start doing that on the Catawba for new water intakes or intakes that were expanding. We had never done that before, and you might imagine what kind of response that got. But part of our proposal, which was initially missed, but eventually everyone bought into, was we were not going to keep that money. We saw this as a way for everybody to recognize the value of the storage and then to do things together that protect it. That was what our intention was all along. And the water suppliers came back and proposed that we form a group that would decide how the money was going to be used and that Duke pay dues as well, just like they are. So that's what we agreed to do. And our total annual dues for the whole organization are $700,000, which is not an insignificant amount of money. If you plan it well and you get good partners, you can do a lot with $700,000 a year. In 2007, there was something else that was occurring. The cities of Concord and Kannapolis were looking at an interbasin transfer for the Catawba. That got a lot of attention all up and down the river basin, particularly in South Carolina. And South Carolina sued North Carolina in the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court took the case, set a special master, negotiations started. And in the end, a settlement agreement was signed there in 2010. Most of the biggest parts of that settlement agreement are just saying, do what all those folks agreed to do in that comprehensive relicensing agreement and continue to communicate well. That in a nutshell, that's what that agreement was. And it has served us well so far. And I told you about the bylaws change in 2020 that allowed other parties, not just intake owners, to become members. I won't go into this slide in detail, but here are the elements really of that North Carolina, South Carolina settlement agreement from the Supreme Court case. The very first time a total evaluation of long-term water supply needs for this river basin was done was in that relicensing effort. In 2005, we finished a water supply study, which looked 50 years ahead and looked at Duke's expected use and looked at all the expected consumptive uses of water. What we learned from that was if everybody continued to operate in their own silo and use the water as they saw fit, that by about 2050, that 11 lake system could no longer support growth. It didn't mean that people would turn their taps on and there'd be no water, but you just wouldn't be able to continue to grow on the back of that lake system. So that was a real wake-up call. And the idea in the settlement agreement is to revisit that study at least every 10 years. And we have been doing that. I will point out number 5 there, develop an MOA, and this MOA was to be between North Carolina and South Carolina to coordinate approvals for bi-state water providers. I'm not sure that's been done. It probably needs to be looked at, frankly, and to be able to make sure that everything in this settlement agreement is actually happening. And I would also suggest that in North and South Carolina, North Carolina needs one of these, South Carolina needs one of these. There needs to be somebody that is accountable for that settlement agreement. The water management group is identified in that settlement agreement to basically do item 2, to do the regular updates of that water supply plan. And we have been doing that. But I don't want either state to forget about this settlement because we don't need to go back there. That was a very painful time for everybody involved. And there's a better way to do it than fighting. So the water management group is trying to continue to find that better way. The River Basin Advisory Commission that's mentioned there in 7, it was very helpful in settling that Supreme Court case. It has not met since 2017. Basically, that we were having lots of difficulties getting elected officials there, and the water management group was seen as being very successful. So it has been dormant since that time. And it, you know, I believe the solution path for hard issues is with the water management group, but just wanted to point that out, that it is not currently an active commission. All right, a little bit about planning. So we did this water supply study back in 2006, and we used a model that has a funny name, KEOPS, but that's Computer Hydroelectric Operations Planning Software is what that stands for. It's a proprietary product of HDR Incorporated. But because this river basin is regulated, and I'm talking about the flow being regulated by hydropower, it really is necessary to have a different kind of model to evaluate long-term water needs here. Our hydro stations are primarily peakers and load followers. So they're relatively small compared to our larger nuclear and fossil plants. So they provide a lot of opportunity for helping with our electric grid's needs. And, you know, without our ability to peak there with hydro on some of these hot summer days, we would have a hard time meeting the loads at times. So we needed something that could really get that characteristic and put it into a water quantity model, because that's the reality of the Catawba Wateree River. So the KEOPS model is the official model for Catawba Wateree. It's also identified as the official model in that Supreme Court settlement. Since that 2006 time, it's been enhanced a couple of times. It was enhanced with a Water Research Foundation effort that the Water Management Group did in 2013. It was enhanced again with our first full update of that water supply study, that water supply master plan that you see there in 14 and 15. And it's being enhanced again for the next version of that. We're calling it the Integrated Water Resources Plan. Reason being that the name has changed is the water supply master plan was still just, it was all about quantity. And everybody understood, you know, you can't completely divorce the quality issues from quantity, but you got to eat an elephant one bite at a time. So that's why we focused on quantity in 2014 and 15. This new version looks at quantity, but we also have other models looking at quality and source water protection type issues. So we're getting more complete in terms of our ability to look at the total water supply. Just some stair steps here that gives you a little more information about those different efforts. And think of it each time as more detail, more refinement, more knowledge is coming out of these study efforts and the resulting plan. All right, but the water supply master plan that we did in 2014, it had some recommendations in it. So we wanted the water supply to last at least to 2100 to provide growth. So we figured out a way to do that with the help of that model and the help of some very wise folks. We needed to get more water use efficient. And there were two really main focuses on that: getting better at managing water loss, particularly real water losses, leaks from municipal systems, basically. And on the residential end, getting more water use efficient in terms of per capita water use. Each individual utility had its own number as to where they were for gallons per capita per day for residential purposes. And each one of them was given a target to get to. Overall, the basin average in 2014 was 85 gallons per capita per day overall. The target 50 years out from then is 70, to get down to 70. We are making progress towards that, but we've got a ways to go.
Sorry, that's for the residential users?
For residential use only, yeah. lowering critical water intakes. So when we have, when we're determining how low we can operate or how far down we can pull one of these lakes in a drought, we have a lot of things to consider, but a main thing is you don't want to uncover a power plant intake, and you don't want to uncover a municipal water intake, and you don't want to uncover a major industrial intake. So we looked at all those, looked at them close, and determined with the help of the owners just how far down could the lake be and you still operate at your full capacity. And then one of those on each lake becomes the most limiting, right? It's the one that's affected first. So we identify which one that is. And then as these intakes get either replaced, they get retired, power plants get closed down, we reset. So whenever somebody comes in and wants to put in a new water intake, you basically have to prove why you can't design that intake so it can operate as low as the hydropower station can go, because that's always the lowest. It's all because our intakes are at the dam and they're very low in the water column. So over time, even without building new lakes, we will increase that 255 billion gallon a day number by being able to use more and more of that water if you have to in a drought. We don't want to, but if you have to, you'll have more use of it. We also developed raw water intake contingency plans for each member. Some had them, some did not have them, some needed to be updated. So we took the approach that things can happen. It could be a terrorist act. It could be a fuel tanker falling off a bridge into the water supply. What would you do if for some significant period of time you cannot use your water intake? So each of the water intake owners now has a contingency plan so that they know what they would do, how they would go about it. We looked at, well, can we get more now in terms of water stored? And one way to do that is to raise the summer target elevations so that you would start a new drought with more water in the total 11 lake system. So we identified Lake James, Norman, and Wiley to have just a 6-inch increase on their target elevations in the summer. That added about 8 billion gallons to the storage number. And then that low inflow protocol, it's all about looking ahead, looking back and looking ahead and taking actions in a timely manner, being aggressive with your actions. So we identified some ways to be a little more aggressive in our actions so that when we do see drought coming, we start slowing down really fast. And one of the biggest places we can slow down is at our hydro stations. You know, if we see the drought soon enough and we start making reducing our minimum flow releases sooner, we will save more water in the reservoir system. All right. We're actually in year 5 right now. We're a tad bit behind, but by the end of this year, we hope to have the integrated water resources planning effort finished and the report recommendations out there. All the bells and whistles won't be on it by the end of this year, but the meat of the product will be there. And we will know what it is as an organization that we need to try to drive to protect this water supply through at least the next 10-year update. And I do want to point out here that doing these plans is not cheap. I think we're going to be at close to $1.5 million now on the integrated water resources plan, and that was just an update of a previous plan. We do appreciate the shared funding support. North Carolina and South Carolina each gave us $500,000, and the rest is coming from the Water Management Group and its members. So we really do appreciate that partnership and absolutely could not do this without that partnership. So thank you for that. All right. this is busy slide. But it just kind of gives you the flow of how we do this. It's all about getting good data, getting it in models and doing all kinds of double checking on those models to make sure they're working right and they're actually telling you the truth. And then doing the alternatives analysis to look at, well, what if we do things differently from a development standpoint or from a power generation standpoint? How could we make this system last longer? The KEOPS model has been invaluable in that. We've got RTI on our consultant team. They've greatly enhanced the model with waterfall, which is a model that essentially takes rainfall, applies it to the watershed, and looks at land use, land cover, and soil types, and all those things that affect how much of that water and how fast it gets to the lake system. So we've got a better idea now of how to gauge inflow. When we did all this for relicensing, we actually went back to 1929, hand logs that hydro station operators were keeping. Piles of them would fill most of this room. And we put all that stuff into spreadsheets, and then we back calculated taking out evaporation estimates and addressing our hydro generation releases, back projecting what water withdrawals were to figure out what the inflow was. Because the inflow is what drives the whole thing, right? You got to know what the inflow is. Well, we've got a better mousetrap now, thanks to RTI. We appreciate that. But the model doesn't give you the answer. The model helps you look at futures and decide which one is the best for you. So I'm proud of the model that we have because it does give us the ability to look at things very differently than the way we have in the past. Just a projection that shows you what is in there right now. The little squiggly red line there is actual net withdrawals. So those go up and down as rainfall has gone up and down. When we have a wet year, our net withdrawals are usually lower. When we have a dry year, they're higher. But overall, there's been a steady increase. There's a trend line there. And we've done some probability analysis, which will be helpful in our alternatives review. But, there's a pretty wide band there between the 95th percentile and the 5th percentile. But that 50th percentile, or I call it the expected value, is about 350 million gallons a day by 2075. And that's a little bit flatter curve than what we were looking at in 2014. To me, that's a good thing. Flatter means more water use efficient. So, all right. We had to take a little step back here. Interbasin transfers are a big deal. They're a big deal every time they come up anywhere in the state, and it's the same in South Carolina. And there is some ongoing effort to look at a potential IBT increase for Charlotte, and Mooresville is also looking at one. But what's on this graph, all these lines, are the existing interbasin transfers. Now, some of these were grandfathered when the law went into effect, I think in 1993. But there are a lot of them on here. There are 12 interbasin transfers on here of varying sizes. And, because the South Fork subbasin is, from a regulatory standpoint, separate from the rest of the Catawba, the ones that go that direction are interbasin transfers as well. So IBTs are not new. They're not new to anybody. They're certainly not new to this river basin. They're not new to our company. We actually had the biggest one in the state of North Carolina up until December 31st. It was right at the point there of the South Fork river basin where it gets very narrow just to the left of Charlotte there. That's all in Lake Wiley. We had Allen Steam Station that picked up water from the Catawba side of Lake Wiley, ran it through the plant, and discharged heated water to the South Fork side of Lake Wiley. It's a 750-something million gallon a day interbasin transfer. But it really, because it all occurred inside Lake Wiley, the effect was not what you would expect from an interbasin transfer. Let's just say nobody was getting bypassed with that. But it's retired now. A lot of activity in the Rocky River Basin. A lot of activity there. And these two that I just mentioned are looking at potential increases to support customer growth in the Rocky River Basin. We have a sister organization in the Yadkin PD. It's called the Yadkin PD Water Management Group. Our board has met with their board to see if there are opportunities for us to work together to try to figure out something that will work in the Rocky River Basin. And that's where we are right now. So we are definitely going to have more information in this version of the plan than previous versions about interbasin transfers. And we are also hopeful that through the history that we have and the science that we put together, that we can help these folks work to a solution that will make sense, and at least everyone will be able to live with it. Everybody might not be happy, but can we live with it? That's the objective. And can we do so and make sure that the water supplies are sustainable for everyone else? All right, we have a stakeholder advisory team that is also just focused on the Integrated Water Resources Plan. It's very, broadly interested team, and they've been very active in helping us make sure that when we're putting all this together, we're doing so in a way that people can find themselves in it. They can understand it, they can see where their interests are and how their interests are impacted. And DEQ has also been well represented there with Kloss and Forrest on that team, and we appreciate that interaction. All right, the state also has a river basin planning process, and there's lots of common information here. All the information the Water Management Group puts together, except for those water use contingency, water intake contingency plans, is public knowledge. Those, for obvious reasons, are secure. But so we're more than willing to share any and everything we have with the state as you all update that river basin plan. I'm almost done here. Source water protection has become a big issue, and it should be. In a river basin that's as developed as ours, certainly land conservation is a high interest item for a lot of people. And we're fortunate to have some very active, very well organized and effective land trusts that we're working with here. And a few years ago, we started carving out a relatively small piece of our annual budget to support initiatives that either protect riparian buffers or that restore impacted streams or impaired streams. And a few of those successes are identified here. We hope to have many more of those going forward, and there will be a source water protection section in that Integrated Water Resources Plan. Because if you're really going to get at total management of the shared water supply, you have to have a presence in source water protection. You have to do that. So I hope we will continue to grow this piece of what we do as time goes on. And I talked a little bit about, the need to educate people about their water supply. That is an uphill battle. We're having new people move to the region all the time. And even as we find lots of folks that have lived in the basin all their life really don't understand where their water comes from, how these lakes are managed, how all the hoops that municipalities have to go through so that when they turn their tap on, the water comes out and it's clean and safe. We started a Citizens Water Academy about 7 or 8 years ago. It's been very, very successful. Where it lasts about 10 weeks, and we have at least one. We have sessions on every element of total water supply management. So on municipal drinking water processes and distribution, wastewater, the same. On public recreation, on what is Duke Energy's role in the river basin and how did that come to be? And on invasive species, habitat management. And every year we have to cut off registration because we just can't support all the demand that's out there. And the feedback from the people that have gone through it has been extremely positive. They really do appreciate being able to get in and learn in a relatively short period of time and get exposed to some things that they just couldn't get exposed to in a classroom setting. All right, and I would like to invite you all to our next Water Summit. It's on April the 3rd in Mooresville at the Charles Mack Citizens Center. We've got a great agenda for that. We're already at about 200 registrants, and I think our room capacity is 250. It's really been a good thing. Last year we were above capacity as well when we had it at TKK. So people seem to really appreciate this. Our theme will be ripple effects, and that you can take that in a lot of different directions. But if you throw a rock in the lake, you can obviously see the ripples going out from it. I really think for the water management group, the rock that was thrown in the lake was a 1998 to 2002 drought, because that was the drought of record at that time in the Catawba Watery Basin. It was later surpassed. But that really got everybody to understand, even though we have the biggest man-made lake in the state of North Carolina, we are not drought-proof in the Catawba. So we had to do a better job figuring out our water supply, how we share it, how we impact each other, and how we can work together to make it better. Sometimes nature sends you a wake-up call, and we got one. And I'm proud of where we've gone with it since then, because we have not forgotten it. I think the last slide is just giving you the names of the membership and our website. We've got a ton of information on that website. This group has completed 69 technical projects in its life, ranging from a few $1,000s to $700,000. In total on those technical projects, I think we've spent $8.5 million plus and out of that 8.5, 1.7 came from other parties. So we've gotten some significant cost sharing there. In total, if you add the administrative stuff in there, it's 83 projects and $10 million we've invested on learning and improving how we use the shared water supply on the Catawba Watery. It's one of the best organizations I've been a part of in 35 years at Duke Energy. And that's all I have today. I really appreciate your attention. I hope I didn't go too long. I talk too much sometimes about these things, but when you love an organization, that's easy to do.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lineberger. I would like to see if any of the committee members have questions, or commissioners who are present at this time for Mr. Lineberger. Commissioner Smith, and then Commissioner McDonald Gibson.
So first of all, having been around sort of at the origin of all this, this has been a hugely positive process. It has really contributed to both educating people and creating a process for managing conflicting water uses. One question, can you provide a little bit more detail on how the water management group interacts with individual proposed interbasin transfers like the Charlotte Water proposal?
Right. Well, really, this is the first go around when you think about it, because the Concord and Kannapolis interbasin transfer really got going before the Water Management Group had officially formed. And it got involved after we formed, but the River Basin Advisory Commission was out there and it kind of had the lead. So this will be the first time that since we've had a water management group that one or more of our members are looking at interbasin transfer increases. We have had some frank conversations about it. Not everybody sees things the same way right now. What we are trying to do, though, is to live up to our mission, which is to protect and enhance that water supply out into the future and protect the environment. So we have some more detail that the members are going to get in the next month. We've had a couple of sessions where we've brought not only the member representatives, but their bosses in to have conversations about IBT, what this means, and, you know, what are the opportunities for addressing the need. So I expect we will have more of those this summer. Our focus has been on science, and we will have the model and the ability to evaluate the interbasin transfer impacts. And when you have that and you can let the facts drive your position, I think we can get to a place that everybody can live with it. But we're not there yet, but we have the intention of getting there. So we have more work to do around the issue. That a lot of, individual organizations have come out with positions. Some have come out with positions. I personally think it's too early to have a position. What is your interest? Is your interest in ensuring that your customers' water needs are met in a safe and sustainable way? And is your interest in protecting the water supply that we share and protecting all of our economic futures? I think everybody involved can agree that those are interests of theirs. But when you put your position out there in front of an interest, it shuts down the conversation that needs to be had, which is looking at, okay, how do these different alternatives affect my interests? How do they affect Duke Energy's interest? I mean, Duke Energy's position as an individual organization has not changed since the Concord-Kannapolis interbasin transfer. And that's that in an ideal world, we'd like for there to be none. We would prefer there are no interbasin transfers, that the water stayed in the basin that it fell on. That's Duke Energy's position. But we also understand as a company that there are times when an interbasin transfer is in the best public interest because of all of the other factors you have to consider. What do the other alternatives look like? And are they unreasonable alternatives? So, it's hard to not bring your position out over in an emotional issue. But I think with the tools that we have, we can lead everybody through a process that they will at least agree on the facts. And that's a really important thing for this organization, is for there to be one set of facts that everybody can agree on. So that's a big part of what I believe the Water Management Group will deliver in the review, is agreement over the facts.
I just wanted to thank you. This is a great presentation. I really appreciated the history and also what a wonderful model of collaborative governance. So I did have a question about what concerns members of the Water Management Group have about water quality in the basin, especially the utilities and river keepers.
Yes. And this is a generality, but as you move down the river, the quality issues become greater because you're basically assimilating the waste from all the people and all the land use practices above. So, yes, we do have concerns. There are a couple that really kind of jump out. One of them is invasive species. And, we are having Lingbia, cyanobacteria issues in some of the reservoirs now. And, but there are ways to treat that. There are chemical processes. We've used grass carp, sterile grass carp to deal with hydrilla, but they can't address Lingbia. But the water management group has become a contracting agent. We are, for the partners that are supporting financially, the treatment of Lingbia in Lake Norman, Lake Wiley, and Mountain Island Lake, and hopefully soon in Lake Wateree, we contract with the external providers that will go out and do the chemical treatments. The water management group does that. These other parties pay us contributions that offset our cost. So it's not an additional cost to us. But that is a very high interest item right now. And especially, Lingbia in certain cases can produce toxins.
Mhm.
So, it's a blue-green algae. So there is some concern there on the water quality end. The other one is nutrient loading, and especially from Lake Wiley downstream. There's been a process going on with South Carolina DHEC, now South Carolina Department of Environmental Services, for several years to try to get their arms around what kinds of reductions are needed from a nutrient loading standpoint. A total TMDL, total maximum daily load, is needed to be identified. They are working with some of our members as well as others that discharge in that lower Catawba area to try to come up with a solution there. But the loading from point sources is easier to address. Addressing non-point sources has to be a part of this equation too. So that is where I wouldn't call it the struggle, but where a lot of the effort is right now. How do you make this fair and address the non-point sources along with the point sources so that the river basin can continue to grow? When I was talking about growth earlier, my thinking was all around the quantity part, but you can get to a point where you can no longer grow because of quality. So we have some issues with nutrient loading in the lower Catawba that are going to need some action.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Deerhage has a question.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Love to have a conversation about history afterwards, if you don't mind. Is one of the stated goals of the planning group to reduce the need for interbasin transfers through efficiencies and growth planning in the community membership?
We don't, when I'm talking about stated goals right now, I'm having to think back to the water supply master plan in 14 and 15, because we haven't finalized the integrated water resources plan yet. But I expect in there will be some specific initiatives around how do we reduce the need for interbasin transfers as we go forward. How do we do that? Because, if you just turn around and look at that river basin map right there, you see the Catawba Basin in white. Lots of gray on top of it, lots of people. Gray is people on that map. And if you look at it and look to the right at the pink, the Yadkin PD Basin, just from here, it looks at least twice as big. The Yadkin PD River Basin is the biggest river basin in North and South Carolina if you forget about the state line. So long term, it's hard to see how the Catawba can continue to support growth after growth after growth in water supply needs in that larger basin. The larger basin has more flow. So, the water management group does not have a specific stated goal about IBTs yet. I think for this integrated water resources plan to be successful, we are going to have to.
And then my second question is completely different topic. I'm glad to hear that you're happy with Waterfall. I used to work at RT. I'm retired from there now, but I knew the people that worked on it. I never worked on it. I do remember in the early days of its development, there was a component with ecological flows. Is that still active at all? Or can you tell me where the planning group stands on ecological flows?
Well, and the ecological flow effort, I think, one of my guys was on that science advisory team that was working on that. His name is Hugh Barwick. They did a lot of work and got to what seemed to be a reasonable solution. Somewhere along the way, the wheels fell off the bus, and we never got to a place with ecological flows. Thank goodness, with these 11 lakes, we've gone through a FERC licensing process. We have ecological flows from these 11 lakes. They're in our license. They're license requirements of Duke Energy. They're also in the model. So as far as releases from the reservoirs, we've addressed the issue. Now, ecological flows out in the tributaries where, a smaller water intake may be located. Those are not really defined at this point. And we probably, and I'm sure we will, make sure in our model that we understand how much water is being left in those streams where there are intakes located in tributaries. There are not a whole lot of those, and the ones that are out there are small in this river basin because of the lake system. The big ones are in the lake, or they're in the main stem of the river that has an ecological flow that's defined by the FERC license.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Well, seeing none, I thank you again, Mr. Lineberger. We appreciate your presentation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. The next information item will be Ms. Holcomb giving us an IBT update.
Hi all, my name is Maya Holcomb and I am the new IBT coordinator with the Division of Water Resources. And I'm going to give a very brief IBT update this morning because I know we might be running a little short on time. We're going to cover 3 of the IBT requests. Today I'll just focus on the new things because we are running short on time and I want to respect everyone's time. So this hasn't changed from last time. The town of Morrisville held 5 public meetings in November. They also presented at the Lake Wylie Marine Commission's regular meeting in late February. With completion of these meetings, this now concludes Morrisville's requirement for their NOI. And since they have completed their public meetings, they are now initiating the environmental impact statement process. Moving on to Charlotte Water. Nothing has changed last time from this slide. Charlotte Water finished their public scoping meetings last July, and now they have moved on to the EIS phase. Although this request is a modification of an existing permit, which typically it requires an environmental assessment, an EIS is necessary due to the provisions of the North Carolina and South Carolina settlement agreement. This slide shows Charlotte Water's preliminary schedule. They are currently hosting their stakeholder advisory group meetings, which we'll talk about in the next slide. And they're developing their draft EIS, which will most likely be ready for review in 2026. Charlotte Water Stakeholder Advisory Group is meeting monthly and will span the length of their EIS. Upcoming meetings are going to focus on educational webinars on conservation, drought management, reservoir operations, hydrologic modeling, and the IBT EIS process. DWR will present on the IBT process on April 23rd, and this is going to focus on marrying the IBT statute and the CBIS statute as part of the webinar series. These are links, so please feel free to review those on your own time. And then lastly, we'll touch on the town of Fuquay. They're undergoing a new IBT, and they are very close to completion on their draft EIS. In the draft EIS, a 6.17 MGD IBT request is now proposed for transfer of water from the Cape Fear River Basin to the Neuse River Basin. Water would be transferred from the Sanford Wastewater Treatment Plant in the Cape Fear River Basin to the Neuse River Treatment Plant in the Neuse River Basin. The next steps coming up on the EIS process, the draft EIS will go to the state clearinghouse for public review. Then there will be public hearing or public hearings on this document. It will be the WAC's decision on how many public hearings to host and who will be assigned as the hearing officer. And this hearing or hearings will most likely be held in a couple of months. I tried to make that as quick as possible. Please let me know if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Holcomb. It looks like Chairman Solomon has a question.
Yeah, Maya, if you will, and I've mentioned this already, but on your website, DEQ official site,
Mhm.
it is very confusing to the public when you've got all the historical IBTs mixed with the new ones.
Okay.
I would just like to request you guys move the new ones up where they can be clearly seen by the public because there are three. The other thing is the information. It is a DEQ website, but the information is very different
Okay.
on all three of those sites. So a little bit of consistency may be good, like notice of intent, what the notice of intent meetings were called. In one case, they were called a wastewater meeting. In another case, they were called IBTs. So look at some of that stuff, if you will, and try to get it consistent across all three.
Definitely. We will work on consistency. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Well, seeing none, thank you again. We appreciate it. And this will, Director Rogers, I want to see if you had any remarks.
Just a couple remarks. I thank you, Mr. Lineberger, for your presentation and the work of the Catawba Water Management Work Group. Much appreciated, and it was a great history lesson as well. We continue, as y'all know, IBTs are of interest here. A lot going on. They're also an interest in the legislature. We've been meeting with staff periodically, updating them, providing our expertise on IBTs. And I believe there's wind in the air that we'll be getting legislation. Not sure what that will contain at this point, but we'll continue our work with the legislature on that and update y'all as we proceed. That's it.
Thank you. I also want to thank Mr. Lineberger again for his presentation and appreciate Ms. Holcomb on the fly shortening hers since we are running a little behind. But at this point, I will conclude the meeting.
And we'll start the air quality on time at 10:15.